The second year of the war in Ukraine has started with Russia now under attack. A wave of drones yesterday attacked at least 4 or 5 targets deep in Russia, including an oil refinery 400 kilometres from the front. Another even reached a gas facility just outside Moscow. That must have made Vladimir Putin jump, but it hit trees before it reached the target. Fair size. It was enough to apparently panic Russia into closing the airspace over St. Petersburg. Joining me is General Jack Keane, a retired 4-star general and the former Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Army. He's now chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and is conducting a review for Congress on President Biden's defence strategy. General Keane, always great to have you on the show. What is going on here with these drone strikes? What's the significance?
Well, I don't have any insight into who's causing them. Certainly, they're not decisive, and whatever's taking place there is largely to harass and also to make the Russian people feel a sense of vulnerability. But I think in time, we'll likely get a sense of who actually conducted those attacks.
That's interesting. Seems to me you're suggesting it may not be Ukraine, but another party. But I guess we shall see. I like the idea of coming close to Moscow. That'll make President Putin hop a little bit, and he's already paranoid enough. General, meanwhile, the wider war, you have voices there in the US Republican right, and I hear them here on the right too, people that write to me every time we talk about the war, saying enough with supporting this war, let's talk peace instead. What do you say to them?
Well, first of all, if we went to negotiations and involving a ceasefire, that plays right into Putin's hands. That is what he wants. That's what happened in 2014 in the Donbass region, the so-called Minsk agreement. It gave him the opportunity to reset, rearm, reposition, all to his advantage, and then at a time and a place of his choosing, reattack. He didn't do any of that during the Trump administration. He saw weakness in Biden, and he reattacked. If we do the same thing here, he will rearm, refit, reposition, and also attack the Ukrainians again from much better positions. The Ukrainians really have an opportunity here, as we looked at the Institute for the Study of War, Andrew, to actually drive the Russians out of Ukraine. They need to get all the weapons that they've requested. They're likely going to begin an offensive in the May-June timeframe. I think they'll make some serious progress here. And if the flow of weapons continues, they can do even more. So we don't want to do anything to stop the Ukrainians from being able to end the suffering of their own people and liberate them. What we want to do is end the war as soon as possible, and that is give the Ukrainians what they need for a decisive victory and drive the Russians out. That is the best possible answer for the Ukrainians and also for the Europeans themselves in terms of their future security.
Now, I'll come back to what the Ukrainians would need, what we must supply them with. But when you say the Ukrainians could actually drive Russia out completely, are you including even the Crimea, which Russia took in 2014? That seems a hard nut to crack. You think that really the entire country could be liberated?
I absolutely do. We've looked at this pretty hard at the Institute for the Study of War. We believe they can approach in the south in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast and cut the MSRs that lead to the land bridge to Crimea. There's 2 of them moving from west to east. Then bring forward all of their long-range artillery, ATACMS and drones, and what aircraft they do have, and pummel the military bases in Crimea, the depots for fuel and ammunition, the staging areas for the drones, and in time move in their combined arms ground forces as well to achieve the same kind of success they're going to achieve in the approach to Ukraine moving south. The Russians are so vulnerable to a combined arms offensive operation against them. It doesn't take much to break through their lines, and once you're through their lines, you begin to roll up their capability. What The Ukrainians achieved some of this back in July, if you recall, of last year, Andrew, but they were not able to complete it because while the Biden administration had given them enough to start the offensive, they didn't give them sufficient weapons to complete it. They could not exploit success. And hopefully by the summer time frame, they'll have the full capability to exploit that kind of success.
Well, let me talk about that. Because you wrote a superb article last week saying this war wouldn't last this long if President Biden actually committed to victory. He did go to pose with Ukraine's president the other day. He said he was all in. But what is he actually failing to do? Because the sort of combined operations you're talking about suggests to me, and I've got no military background apart from a little bit of Army Reserve way back when I was a student, it seems to involve air cover at the minimum, and they don't have an air force, an operational one, and they would need to be trained in the tanks that are finally now being delivered there. What else do they need? Are we going to supply them with planes now?
Well, they need more tanks. They're just getting some tanks arriving now. They really requested 300. They'll have something less than 100, I suspect, when they bring their offensive. This is another area of frustration for them because they requested these last summer, and here now they just will be arriving in the weeks to come. That is handcuffing the Ukrainians from achieving the kind of liberation of their people that if they had the means to do it, they could. The center of gravity for the Ukrainian success is the iron-willed determination of their military supported by their people, and secondly, are the arms and munitions they're receiving from the U.S.-led coalition. But in the same breath, I'll tell you, they haven't received sufficient amount to be as successful as they can be. And when the president says we're going to be there to the end, we're going to be there at the finish, he's actually playing into Putin's hands because Putin is playing for time. He thinks eventually he can outlast the Ukrainians. He has people 3-1. He has huge ammunition and equipment shortages himself, but he also believes he can outlast the U.S.-led Western coalition because he thinks the political will and resolve will eventually evaporate, and they won't stay the course. That's what he's counting on. So what we should be doing is give them everything they need as quickly as possible to end it as quickly as possible.
I'd love Australia to back that up by sending its tanks. We haven't used the tank in actual warfare in decades and decades now. We've got 60 or 70 of them, which are essentially just rolling scrap because they're no good to us at the moment. I can't understand why we don't send some tanks. General Jack Keane, thank you so much indeed for your time.